When we think of the fall of the Roman Empire, our minds immediately drift to those epic scenes: barbarians leaping over the walls, temples being plundered, or assassins whispering in the shadows of marble palaces. Yet the force that brought one of history's greatest civilizations to its knees was not merely the blows of external invasion. The death of a civilization rarely begins with a grand collision. It begins with a quiet, invisible decay. At the center of that decay lies the treasury. Long before Rome was brought down by foreign enemies, it had already begun to die from within, because its money had collapsed. For those in today's economic laboratories who believe money can be manipulated without consequence, Rome's dusty pages still hold some of the harshest and most relevant warnings. Let us set the stage and return to the depths of history, to the silver gleam of the denarius. For centuries, the denarius was the unshakable backbone of the Roman economy. First minted around 200 BC, it was nearly pure silver. It was not merely a medium of exchange, it was confidence cast into metal. Roman soldiers were paid in it, merchants across distant lands demanded it, and ordinary people stored their labor and savings in it. The strength of the empire and the value of its currency were bound together by an unbreakable chain. As long as people believed in Rome, they believed in its money. But the cost of running an empire proved heavier than its treasuries could bear. By the 2nd century AD, Rome was struggling to defend its vast borders. Pressure from Germanic tribes in the north, threats from the Parthians in the east, and internal unrest placed unbearable strain on the treasury. Legions demanded ever higher pay, while aqueducts and roads required constant maintenance. When tax revenues could no longer keep pace with military expenditures, emperors turned to a familiar but deceptive solution: debasement. Instead of risking revolt by raising taxes, they chose to secretly reduce the silver content of the denarius. The numbers reveal the anatomy of this disaster in stark detail. Under Augustus, the denarius contained approximately 95% silver. By the time of Caracalla, it had fallen to around 50%. By the reign of Gallienus, it dropped below 5%. What had once been the most trusted currency in the world became little more than a bronze disc, coated with a thin layer of silver. The state was effectively deceiving its own citizens through its coinage. And the people did not just see the change, they felt it deeply. The result was inevitable: inflation. As money lost its connection to real value, prices surged uncontrollably. Wheat that once cost a single denarius now required dozens, even hundreds. This was not an abstract theory. It was a reality that shattered lives. Soldiers demanded higher wages to keep up with rising costs. Merchants refused to accept coins that lost value by the day. Local economies regressed into primitive barter systems. And as confidence eroded further, emperors responded by minting even more debased coins, falling into the same illusion that quantity could replace value. This was the same vicious cycle repeated throughout history. By the mid-3rd century, the crisis reached its peak. Rome entered nearly 50 years of chaos, marked by invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors rose and fell in rapid succession, some ruling only for months before being assassinated. Yet behind this political turmoil stood a broken financial system. The state attempted to collect taxes in coins that had become nearly meaningless. Farmers abandoned their land rather than pay. Trade networks disintegrated. In desperation, the government imposed price controls and forced labor, but none of it could override economic reality. Emperor Diocletian's edict on maximum prices in 301 AD stands as one of the most tragic monuments of this desperation. It attempted to fix the prices of thousands of goods and services, from grain to wages, and impose the death penalty on violators. The result was catastrophic. Trying to control prices while the currency itself was collapsing only worsened the situation. Official trade collapsed, black markets flourished, and production came to a halt. People learned a harsh truth once again. No law, no sword, and no punishment can restore value to a broken currency. Eventually, Rome was forced to abandon the denarius altogether. Constantine the Great introduced the solidus, a gold coin of consistent purity, which restored a measure of stability. However, by then, the Western Roman Empire had already been fatally weakened. The debasement of the denarius had hollowed out the empire's economic foundation and corroded its social fabric. Armies could no longer be sustained. Trust had evaporated. Rome's fall was not a single moment. It was a long and painful unraveling that began with the destruction of its money. What does this historical tragedy mean for us today? History is unequivocal. The destruction of money is, in effect, the destruction of civilizations. Rome believed it could deceive its people with coins that looked the same but contained less value. Modern states often fall into similar illusions, printing money, manipulating interest rates, and inflating away massive debts. Yet the outcome never changes. The burden falls on the most vulnerable. Real wealth evaporates. And the most critical asset of any society, trust, collapses. Rome learned this lesson through hardship and blood. If we ignore it, we will be forced to learn it again. History did not end with Rome. Only the actors changed. In Weimar Germany, the government turned to the printing press to meet crushing war reparations. By 1923, hyperinflation had reached unimaginable levels. A loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. People carried wages in wheelbarrows. Lifelong savings became worthless. Just as in Rome, those who held real assets survived, while others were pushed into poverty. This economic devastation laid the groundwork for the rise of Adolf Hitler. The same pattern repeated in Zimbabwe in the early 2000s. Excessive money printing drove inflation to an almost incomprehensible 89.7 trillion%. Prices doubled daily. Money became more worthless than paper itself. Eventually, the country abandoned its currency entirely. Even in modern developed economies, the pattern persists in subtler forms. In 1971, the United States abandoned the gold standard, transforming the dollar into a fiat currency, backed not by tangible assets, but by trust. Since then, money supply has expanded dramatically. Debt has surged, and purchasing power has steadily eroded. Today, what $1 could buy in 1971 requires more than $6. The appearance of money has not changed, but its substance has been hollowed out. Governments present this process as economic growth. Rising nominal wages are framed as prosperity, even as real costs rise faster. But the underlying truth remains unchanged. Inflation is a silent transfer of wealth. What makes the present moment uniquely dangerous is its global scale. Rome's collapse was imperial, Weimar's was national, Zimbabwe's was local. Today, the entire global system operates on fiat currencies, massive debt, and central banks capable of creating trillions at will. The next major crisis will not be contained. It will ripple across the world. And history is clear. Those who suffer most are not the elites with assets, but ordinary individuals dependent on salaries, savings, and pensions denominated in fragile currencies. So, what should individuals take from Rome's monetary collapse? First, understand that inflation is not an accident. It is policy. Second, recognize that real wealth does not reside in paper or digital balances, but in tangible assets, skills, and productive capacity. Third, never assume stability is permanent. Romans once believed their system was eternal. They could not imagine their currency becoming worthless. Yet financial systems decay slowly, and then suddenly. When trust disappears, everything begins to unravel. Contracts fail, trade collapses, and governments lose legitimacy. The barbarians at the gates may deliver the final blow, but the true destruction begins within the treasury. History does not repeat exactly, but its patterns remain. If you fail to understand them, you will be crushed by them. The Roman currency crisis is not just a story of distant emperors or ancient greed. It is a timeless warning about the fragility of money when it is abused by power. And that fragility has never disappeared. If this perspective has changed the way you see the world, do not ignore it, because history is still whispering its answers, for those willing to listen.